I remember going, like, you posted something on like your Instagram stories, and it was really impactful to me because it's like, oh, these are the things that people actually really need to do to like people are not happy with like the system as it currently is, right? Like police, you know, BLM, all this stuff. So like, what do people actually, like, how can people actually like invoke change? Like protesting is like, you know, it's working, it's, you know, doing certain things, but like to actually like instate in your government the process of change, like what do people actually need to do? Just vote? Is voting enough?
I mean, that is a really good question. I mean, yeah, voting is super important because obviously voting at every level also is very important. I think some people get really into like only presidential elections and they just don't vote in local elections at all or anything. Well, just as important, and more important.
Yeah, real quick on that too is like I feel like people think that voting is like, oh, it's a Democrat or Republican thing, and they don't realize that there's like 14 other parties that you should be voting for, so that those parties can also get more money. They may agree with what your thoughts are more. Like the idea that we have a two-party system just blows my mind.
Everyone knows it's dumb, but we all succumb to it because we feel like your vote doesn't matter if you don't vote these two things. But you feel like it doesn't matter. It's like your vote does matter because they need funding, and they only get funding if people vote for them. That drives me nuts.
Or you just donate to their campaign. That's also a way to get involved, is to donate to the campaigns of the people you actually support.
There you go.
I mean, number one way currently, I mean, if you're also enraged by what's going on, or if you feel like things could be different, whether you're that angry about it or not, obviously you should just be educating yourself. I think that's been like a huge message recently, more than before, that I love and that is super important. If there's a point of view you don't understand, don't just not agree with it. Like research it a little bit and see what it says. Like,
why don't you agree with something? Not just I don't agree with that, but wait, and ignore it. Why don't I agree with that? And research
multiple points of view.
Yeah. And exactly that next question of I don't agree with it. Why don't I agree with it? Why do they agree with it? That I think is the most important question that people so rarely ask. They think about their shoes. Will tend to assume, and again, I feel like it stems back to the two-party idea where it's like, well, that person wants this, this, and this, and we just give that person a label of this is why they do that. And you're like, wait a minute, why does this person feel this way? Because the vast majority of people want what's best for whatever the cause is, whatever their self is, whatever their situation is, and to look at it as though that person wants to take away my rights or wants to take too many rights for themselves, or you know, like whatever it is, it's like you degrade that person into a nothingness argument where it's like there's a human there that for some reason wants X, Y, or Z that you don't want. Maybe you should figure out why they want that.
Yeah, it's got to be important if they want it that much. And it's true.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's also just such an important piece as it relates to having conversations about these things with family members or friends or anything like that. Like, you do have to really understand why somebody thinks that in order to actually have a productive conversation about racism or the police or anything. Like, those are big topics that people will immediately shut down if you're not actually approaching it in a specific way. And I do think there's been a lot of conversation, and I totally agree that it is kind of like, it's our job to have these conversations. And I do think that's a part of the action that you can do, is actually speaking up in certain moments.
Awesome.
Or just even if you are in a room where everybody agrees, just actually talking about those things sometimes is fine.
Yeah.
And really important to like get everybody's points of view and just, you know, have those sort of discussions. I think is really important. The stuff some of the stuff that you were referencing, Katey, that I had shared on Instagram, I think also kind of ties back to some of what I was talking about in, you know, as an attorney, really understanding how a lot of this works sort of behind the curtain.
Right.
And I've had some direct experience with this, but, you know, the topic of conversation is, you know, police, the police.
Yes.
And, you know, whether it's kind of been divided into sort of three camps right now. It's like police reform, police defunding and police abolition. And there's a ton of videos out there with way more educated folks than me kind of breaking down what those three things are. But regardless of which one you want or are in favor of, it's really helpful to know who is involved in sort of making these decisions behind the scenes, who actually controls the police. Like, what does that actually look like? There's some federal legislation currently up. I think it's called Justice in Policing. And I think some Democratic senators are trying to get it through, and it is federal legislation, so they are able to directly control sort of federal policing, whatever that looks like. But anything that they're trying to change in states, it's going to be done through federal funding. It's always a condition on receiving federal funding, right? So that is a party for sure, and that is, a bill that you can ask your senators to support if you agree with it. That's a way you can act. But the local level, I think, for police specifically is the most important arena to get involved with if you're interested at all in any of the initiatives or topics of conversation that have been going around.
I learned that just from the Minneapolis City Council being the board that is in charge of choosing the police funding and all these things. So it's literally, at least in our city, it's down the hill is City Hall.
It's crazy.
Where they meet. Like, I can go quite easily. I could walk if I didn't have a car to be in that meeting to see what they're saying, offer my opinion and be a part of it. And so like there is that federal level where it's like, oh, the Senate or the House are voting on X, Y, or Z. But at your local level, it's as local as your city. And so like wherever your city council meets, you can be there and you can be a part of like, here's what I think cops should do. I think we should have a police force that is for safety and helping people, and we should have a police force that's for emergency situations.
Yeah, totally.
Like all that kind of stuff. So I definitely learned that.
Yeah, the city is definitely like who has the most sort of direct conversation, impact, control over your police officers. The other party that's involved that I was talking a bit about on Instagram is police unions. So there's police unions that like every police officer is a part of. These unions are huge. And they have a ton of control, obviously, over the police. And what happens is, I'm not going to generalize because I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure every police department, probably in every city, is a part of the union, and they have.
I think they have to at this point.
Yeah.
Maybe other legal topics. Maybe there's agreements between like the police unions and the city. They're called collective bargaining agreements. Pretty much anytime you have an agreement with the union, it's called a collective bargaining agreement. And so these contracts are where, if it is deemed that a change or something going on or some part of this employment of a police officer needs to be bargained over, like it should go under the contract, then that it's all written down in these agreements. And it truly I've been directly a part of these like conversations and these negotiations. I worked in a labor office for a city. So I've seen it, and it is insane how like minute the possible change could be that a union is going to say, because they essentially have to, but they're going to say like, we need to bargain over this, like this we need to talk about it. And it's just like, it slows things down, makes it a lot harder to actually get reform. So when we're talking about police reform, it's all going to boil down to these sort of like contract negotiations between your like mayor and city like labor office and the union. Because they're probably going to dispute it.
Right.
There's a whole thing about
their job to dispute it. It literally is their job to dispute it, to make it. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. So there's a lot there that I think you really have to push on your local representatives to make sure that like that is top of the list of their like negotiation list. Like we want these things. These are a priority. we want them more than these other things, because it's all a contract negotiation. Like, it's just a negotiation process. So you want to make sure that it's like, I want these. Like, this is what we need the police department to do. Defunding is obviously in a different arena. That's something your mayor's office, like, they're setting the
whoever's
budget.
passing your budget. Yeah. Like, let's move it away from ammo and like, let's buy less ammo for cops and let's pay for more schooling. Let's pay for more,
mental health stuff.
Actual like at home
social workers. So I don't know.
What is it a social worker that would come in?
I think
for
right?
Those kind of situations where like, oh, there's someone with a mental health issue here. We bring them in, and you bring them in, and they're able to like talk down the situation before a cop ever has to get involved. So like you're taking the water that you would put out a fire with, and you're saying, instead of buying this water, we're gonna spend money on fireproofing. And so you're spending money on making sure you don't have to call the cops, basically. But you still
preventative care in a way.
So whoever,
for the body of society.
whoever where you are is located, you'd want to talk to them about increasing these preventative measures. And so so there's that whole argument.
Things need to happen in tandem as well, because people, I think, when you think of, I think politicians are more comfortable like reforming the system as it exists, because that has a process. And you can talk to them about reducing budgets and changing spending. They do that all the time. I think when you get to the sort of police abolition conversation, that's a much bigger sort of mission and focus that I think is going to take a lot more time. But the one thing I want to encourage people, also sort of a theme throughout this whole conversation, the collective bargaining agreements that exist between your police union and your city are all typically online. That you should be able to access them and read them. And you'll see, you can see firsthand how difficult it is to actually fully discipline a police officer, to actually fire a police officer. Most of these contracts have ways that police officers can reapply even after being fired for a job. Can you even imagine getting fired from a job and being allowed to reapply and hired again? Like, it's just crazy. And all of these are in these agreements. So I really want to encourage people in your city, like, look up the agreement, just read through it. If there's something you don't understand, like, reach out to somebody that you think might understand it, do a little bit of Googling, but typically, like, you have access to this.
Awesome.
Like, you should be able to see it, and the people that you can influence are your local representatives. And if you know a police officer, ask them to reach out to their union. Like, unions listen to their union members. So I'm thinking, like, all of these good cops that we talk about, like, there's these bad cops, good cops, and everybody has ideas about all of that. But if these people exist, like, they should be telling their union, like, I'm fine with this. Like, this is something we want also, so that unions can kind of redirect because unions are also, like, lobbying against these things. There's a lot out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of motion that controls a lot of these situations, and just reaching out to anybody that you have access to in order to like let them know what you think about the situation, whatever edge of it is you're on. And there's a lot of them where like the defund the police, like, I love the idea of spending more money on preventative measures. I also think that when you have these preventative measures in place, it takes time for those to result in lower crime rates. So you can't immediately have a new budget that says, instead of spending X, we're going to spend it over here. And so you divide this one by 2, but you multiply this one by 2. Like, that doesn't function. You have to increase your cost on preventative measures, and then you've got to wait for the preventative measures to take place, that they're actually functioning and lowering your crime rates before you can then, lower, like, hey, we have less crime now, so now we can lower our police rates, or we only have cops for this sort of thing. This one, domestic abuse issue that we had, we're now handling before it becomes an issue. So now we don't need that many cops that are responding to domestic violence issues. And so you've got to have this idea of like, I need to spend the money to get us to where we want to be before we get there. And that's a hard conversation, because then it's like, how much do you spend? And then you also don't see the results for a period of time. And it's like, how long does it take for that period of time before we start lowering this cost? You know, there's a lot of things involved with it. And it's definitely one of those, like, figure out how it works in your area, figure out what you think is best for your area, and be in conversation, or be in the conversation, because it's so local. Like you said, your local police officer, like we were talking, your local council, like it's so local. You can be a part of it and you can understand it.
Yeah, I do. I think an illustration that comes to mind, to kind of piggyback off what you said, Blaine, I think about like this. The whole system in my mind is kind of like this hose. For some reason, I imagine a hose, and you've got like the faucet on one end, right, and the spout on the other. I think we can't be siloed in our approach to only do sort of like take one stance on like how to solve this problem, right? The hose is long and involves a lot of different things. It's in total, it's like the criminal justice system, right? And there's flaws all throughout it, and there's interventions and ways that we can sort of like change and fix the system for the better all throughout it as well. And I agree with you. I love the idea of like funding things that are actually going to like get to the source, right? The faucet itself,
stop the crime before it happens. Right? Yeah, but if you shut it off, that water still has to trickle through the rest of the hose, right? You can't just do that one step and fix everything else. Like there's still going to be a ton of people being fed through the hose until the water is actually all the way out. So you need, like, you have to intervene all throughout it. And that's we talk a lot about police discretion. That's there's prosecutorial discretion. There's sentencing issues. There's a lot of ways that like the judicial system, and when you're in a courtroom, a lot of like diversion programs are something I'd highly suggest people look into. Like, there's a lot of ways that people are sort of trying to like make the system better.
Yeah.
I 100% think that we need to sort of address the source, but we also need to continue to like support these other interventions in order for the entire thing to be better.
Right. It'd be kind of silly to be like, oh, this one thing is going to fix it all.
Yeah.
The cure-all for the system.
Yeah.
It's never the case.
And I feel like that's, again, one of my biggest issue with politics is that it's such a two-party system. We defund the cops or we keep the cops. Like, one of the
extremities.
It's just this extreme lever. And it's like, well, maybe we should kind of like touch the lever a little bit in and out. Like when I drive a clutch, it's not just in and out. Like there's a little bit of tap on that clutch so that you can like move yourself up a hill, you know? And I feel like that's lost on a lot of people when they get so riled up in like one way or the other.
Us versus them kind of mentality.